Budget Office, by the way, is now forecasting a $400 billion increase for this year's budget deficit. That number is 27% higher than the budget watchdog's original estimate back in February. Social Security and Medicare are among the key factors driving those costs up. The CBO is projecting that the nation's debt is going to top $56 trillion by 2034 as spending and interest expenses continue to outpace tax revenues. Steve Rattner, let me bring you in. Former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner with us as well as John Meacham. Steve, you know, when I ran for Congress, I was complaining about a $4 trillion debt. A deficit was around $250, $300 million, breaking records. This seemed to be unmanageable. It kept exploding through the Bush years, exploding through the Obama years, and then it just spiked, precipitously went up when Republicans and Donald Trump were in power. Over 4 years, the national debt went up more in Donald Trump's 4 years than any time over the past 230, 35 years, all the other presidents before him. And it continues to go up, and whether there's a Republican or Democrat in power, unless something dramatic is done, it will continue to go up over the next 10, 15 years. Talk about the risks that we face as a nation and what we need to do to bring that debt down.
So first of all, Joe, the risks are enormous. But just to put this in a little bit of historical context, as you well know, President Clinton left office with a surplus in the budget. We still had debt, but at least we were starting to pay it down. And then George W. Bush came into office, and famously, Cheney said to him, deficits don't matter. Reagan proved that. And they passed 2 rounds of tax cuts, eliminated the surplus, and we went off into deficit land, where we have been ever since. And obviously we had crises like 2008 that we had to respond to. And there was a pretty valiant effort by President Obama after that to try to get the deficit down, but we didn't make that much progress. And then Trump came along with this huge tax cut that he said would be paid for. And it turns out it ended up costing almost $2 trillion, according to CBO numbers, of extra debt simply from his one tax cut. And we had COVID, which we had to deal with, obviously. And now here's where we are, as you just said. I think the dangers, a couple of dangers. The first danger is that if Trump comes back, his tax cuts actually expire mostly next year. He wants to extend them. The CBO has said that would cost $4 trillion more to extend his tax cuts, so that's more debt. And there's really no sense anymore that we need to bring the deficit down, although President Biden does have a policy that would bring it down somewhat, but the urgency is not there. What are the dangers? Look, there are 2 potential dangers. One is something cataclysmic, where we wake up one day and the people who buy our debt now, which are actually heavily Americans, not the Chinese anymore as much, but a lot of American pension funds, they suddenly wake up and say, we're worried and we're just not going to buy all this debt, or it's just too much debt for us to buy. And then you have a huge increase in interest rates and a huge increase in the federal government's borrowing rates. The other potential outcome, which I think is slightly more likely, is what is a little bit like the parable of the boiled frog, that we just keep adding debt and interest costs to our budget. And those interest costs just keep pushing out all the other important things we need to do in government priorities, everything from spending to national parks to cleaning up the environment. Whatever you want to do is going to get squeezed out as we have to pay more and more interest on that debt.